is, why do they do that? Understanding what your child is saying when they do not have the words. And I'm presenting. My name is Sarayu. I'm a BCBA at Bierman, and I work at the Needham location. So I'll go ahead and move to my next slide. All right, so just some kind of introductory stuff. So obviously this is a webinar, so everyone is going to be on mute. Unfortunately, we can't have participants unmuting just because of the way that the webinar works. But if you have any questions, please type them into the chat. This is going to be a pretty interactive presentation, so I've definitely included a lot of examples and a lot of opportunity for you guys to, shout out things that you think and try to figure out different situations in the examples. So feel free to use the chat and I'll have that open throughout the presentation. So about us, Bierman. So Bierman Autism Centers is a place where young kids engage in play to learn foundational skills that they can build on, such as self-advocacy and communication. We recognize that every kid's success is unique, and our one-on-one approach really allows us to drive progress, use measurable outcomes while each child is advancing on their own terms. So our team is dedicated to making learning welcoming and fun by erasing the line between learning and play. Kids at our centers enjoy taking on new challenges and become motivated as they learn new skills. And our approach ensures that kids become confident, empowered, lifelong learners. So our circle of care and support includes the whole family, not just the child. So we really try to empower parents through training and collaboration. And these are our pillars, our values as a company. So we really want kids to just be kids. We accept each child for who they are, a unique person. We want learning to occur through play. So we're really trying to erase that line between learning and play to keep children engaged and motivated. We believe that empowerment is key. So we use everyday activities to teach children foundational skills such as self-advocacy and communication. And we really believe in engagement in families and the importance of building connections and working towards shared goals. And we have a commitment to progress, so we're dedicated to each child's everyday and long-term progress. So kind of our agenda for today. So we're going to start off by kind of providing you guys with a definition of behavior. And then we're going to kind of look at how and why behavior happens. And then we'll get into practicing, analyzing scenarios from a behavior analytic perspective. And we're going to discuss strategies to support your kids at home. So to just dive right in. What is behavior? Behavior is, in the world of behavior analysis, it's defined as any interaction that a person has with their environment. And we're not just talking about like the challenging behavior, so to speak. So we're not just talking about having maybe tantrums or aggression, things like that. We're talking about just about any sort of interaction that you might have with your environment. Every single individual, every single organism in the world engages in behavior. So here are some examples. Crying, right? A baby cries, that's how a baby interacts with its environment. Asking for a toy. You might see like a kid approaching their mom or dad and asking them, can I have this toy? Or asking their friends. And that's them interacting with their environment. Jumping, singing. And then of course, like things like hitting and tantrums. Here I'll ask you guys to throw in a couple of examples in the chat. Can anyone think of some examples of behaviors that they've seen their kids engage in? Okay, yeah, definitely. I've seen that before. Biting. Anything else? Hand flapping. Yes, I've seen that as well. Pinching, scratching. Yeah. Anyone think of some behaviors that might not be considered things that we decrease? Screaming, definitely. Oh, biting when you're upset and sometimes even when you're happy. I've definitely seen that too. Humming. Yeah, that's definitely a common behavior. I engage in it. So amazing. Thank you for your participation. Um, okay, so the next one. So talking about those, and thank you, Carla. Yeah, that could definitely be behaviors for sure. So behaviors targeted for reduction, or BTR, that's sort of what we call it here at Bierman. And we try to use this kind of term just because it's a very neutral way to talk about it. So there are definitely behaviors we want to increase, like talking and communicating and playing appropriately. And we have some behaviors that we want to decrease. So something to remember about behaviors targeted for reduction is that they're communicative in nature. So other people's behavior is often trying to tell you something. For example, a baby crying is probably telling you that they want food or that they want to be picked up or they're sleepy. A kid raising her arms up might mean that she wants to be picked up, and that's her telling you, right, with her body and her behavior that she wants to be picked up. Someone calling you on the phone, that might mean that they want to talk to you. So thinking about that behavior in the sense that it's somebody trying to tell you something. Something we think about when we're addressing behaviors to reduce is what is their social significance. So social significance is looking at why it's important that a behavior is reduced or decreased. So I see here are some like indications that a behavior is socially significant. So a behavior is maybe not age appropriate. For example, somebody biting is not really a behavior that's like age appropriate for them. Um, like a 8-year-old having really long tantrums, right? Might not be age appropriate. And so another reason might be that this behavior is occurring at higher rates than are age appropriate. So like a 3-year-old having like a long tantrum, a 2-year-old having a high number of tantrums per day. A 3-year-old and a 2-year-old, it's pretty age appropriate for them to have tantrums. I would honestly say like it's not appropriate if they never ever got upset about things, right? But we're looking at those instances that are out of like kind of the range that other kids have, like that are maybe a little bit longer or more often. Another thing we might look at is this behavior interfering with somebody's ability to learn? So somebody had mentioned hand flapping. Imagine that, you know, you're having hand flapping when it's time to work on handwriting. It might be getting in the way of you being able to learn. So we might consider a behavior like that socially significant because it's getting in the way of learning. Another thing that it might interfere with is your independence. So visual stereotypy is an example I always use. That's, you know, when a kiddo is like kind of really intensely focused on some visual stimulus, and that can sometimes be really distracting to them and to participate in instruction. Or another example might be like having tantrums around using the bathroom, which might interfere with things like potty training. And the last thing I usually look at for social significance is unsafe behaviors. So behaviors like elopement in the community, like you're going on a walk and, you know, your kiddo's breaking their hand away to run, hitting, like we talked about, self-injury, someone saying like biting yourself, pinching, scratching, those things might be very unsafe, and we would consider that socially significant. So kind of moving forward, I'll refer to them, these behaviors that are not like socially significant, as behaviors targeted for reduction, or BTR. You might also hear it called like challenging behavior or barrier behavior or undesirable behavior in other settings. So why do we engage in behavior? And I guess by this, I mean all behaviors, not just those like BTRs, those behaviors targeted for reduction. So the reasons we engage in behaviors is one, to get good things, right? So we want access to food, to toys, to attention from others, Another reason might be to try to get away from like quote unquote bad things. So avoiding doing homework, covering your ears if there's a loud noise, running away from bath time or brushing your teeth. So that's sort of an oversimplification, right? And in behavior analysis, we look at kind of 4 common functions of behavior. So here are the 4 functions that we look at. And of course, there might be other reasons that behavior occurs, like medical reasons, setting events like being tired. But these are typically a pattern that we end up seeing is one of these 4 functions. So the attention function means that the person engages in a behavior to receive attention from somebody. So this could be attention from a parent, a friend, a teacher, a boss, your siblings. In our own lives, we may see someone who likes to work out at the gym more than working out alone because of their attention received at the gym, right? I mean, I personally prefer going to the gym than being alone because I get to see my friends there, right? I might engage in that behavior for attention from my friends. Access is another one. So tangible is what we call it. A tangible is sort of any item, right, that's available. So they might want to access something that they can like touch, feel, see, hear, or smell. So a preferred toy or activity. I feel like we see this a lot with kids who might engage in like coming up to you and pointing to things that they want because they want to access that item that's, up out of reach. Or a baby cries because it wants food. Or I might just, go to work because I want to earn money, right? So these are some things that people engage in for access to tangibles. So that's another reason we engage in behavior. A third reason is escape. So basically wanting to get out of something or avoid something that you don't want to do. So for kids, you might see like going to school, getting a bath, completing homework, going to the doctors. Kids can definitely engage in some behaviors to escape these situations or avoid these situations, right? You might have in your life, like situations that you'd like to avoid and definitely engaging in behaviors. Like, for example, if you're driving on the highway and you see a police officer, you might want to avoid a ticket and slow your car down. So that's like an example of engaging in a behavior for escape. And the last one is automatic. This is a pretty tricky one to kind of describe. Sometimes it's called sensory. Basically, this means that somebody engages in a behavior because it feels good to engage in that behavior. And engaging in that behavior, like, is the reason you're getting reinforcement. So an example I always use is if you get a mosquito bite on your arm, you might be scratching at that mosquito bite because in that moment, it's making the mosquito bite feel less itchy, right? And that would be an example of an automatic behavior. We'll definitely talk more about this and do some examples as we go further along in this presentation. But our next section is talking about the ABCs of behavior. So we try to analyze, when analyzing a behavior, we look at what happens around the behavior to identify the function. So what we talked about before, or the why. So the first step of this is being able to look at an event objectively and understanding the events surrounding a behavior that might cause it to occur and continue occurring in the future. So these are the 3 pieces, the ABCs. The antecedent is the word we use to talk about what happened immediately before a behavior occurred, right? The behavior is talking about what the person did, and the consequence is what happened after the behavior that ended it. So you guys are going to want to remember this because we'll talk about it over the next few slides. But to analyze an event, when you're thinking back, you want to think about the ABCs, the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. So consequences. So when we're talking about the consequences, this is probably the most important piece when you're analyzing a behavior. So consequence in behavior analysis means that anything that happens after a behavior. This does not actually mean just punishment. It means any sort of situation. So basically, whatever the behavior achieves, when the behavior achieves the intended result, the individual is more likely to engage in that behavior in the future. So what that means is like if a kid raises their hands and mom picks them up, they're more likely to do that again in the future because the consequence of them raising their hand is mom picking them up. Obviously, this isn't a punishment. This is just something that happened after they engaged in a behavior. So when we analyze behavior, we look at external consequences as what maintains behavior. And that's what makes behavior happen again in the future. So external or environmental consequences. All right. Now we're going to get into some examples. So the next few slides provide examples of some possible situations so that we can practice together how to identify the antecedent, behavior, and consequence. So it can sometimes be tricky in the moment to tease this out, but with practice, it definitely comes easier over time. So the first few, I'll kind of give you the answer after I read the scenario, and then we'll do some practice where I'll ask you guys to drop in the chat your thoughts. So here's my first example. Johnny was at the grocery store with his mom, and at the checkout line, Johnny saw a Snickers bar and he asked his mom to buy it for him. His mom said, "Not right now. We're going to have dinner when we get home." Johnny started crying and asking his mom for the candy bar over and over again. Johnny's mom said, "All right, just this once," and put the Snickers bar in their basket to buy. Johnny stopped crying. So we can tease this out a little bit. Here are the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. So the antecedent, what happened immediately before the behavior occurred? Mom said no, right? Mom was like, "No, you can't have this candy bar. I made dinner. We're going to have it at home." Then the behavior. So what did the individual do? Johnny cried and repeatedly asked for the candy bar. And then the consequence. What is the thing that ended this whole episode of behavior? Mom bought him the candy bar, right? Even though, like mom said, just this once, the external consequence of receiving the thing that he wanted might be what continues to have crying at the checkout line occur in the future. He might not necessarily remember that mom said just this once. All he might remember is, "Oh, I cried, and then mom put the candy bar in my basket." So we'll definitely talk more about that in future slides. Here's example number 2. Sarah was playing in the park with her basketball. Another child comes up to her and grabs the ball from her hands, and Sarah yells, "Hey, that's mine." The other child hands her the ball back, and Sarah stops yelling. So let's tease this one out. The 3 things that happen. So the thing that happened right before the behavior, a child grabbed the ball from Sarah. Then Sarah yelled at her. That was the behavior. And then the consequence that got Sarah to stop yelling, the child handed her the ball back. So kind of seeing the pattern, right? Something happens, there's a behavior, something happens after, and the behavior stops. The third example I'll show you guys before you'll do your practice is William. William's hungry. He is in the kitchen and sees the snack cabinet. He asks his mom, "Can I have some cookies?" His mom says yes and gives William some cookies. After eating 3 cookies, William stops asking his mom for food. Okay, so Carla has a question. Agree with what you're saying, but what if your kid's just upset? The antecedent when you say no and stay calm eventually starts hurting or ups the ante. Oh, I see. Hurting other people or bolting. That's a really great question. And I think actually towards the second half of the presentation, I'll talk a little bit about like strategies. Initially, we talk about analyzing the behavior in this way so that we can understand the situation, and then selecting the strategy that you're going to implement is kind of once you understand why the behavior is occurring. So that's a really great question. So going back to this example, here's the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. I wanted to include this example because it's talking about a behavior that is really age appropriate and not something that we'd be looking to reduce, right? So William saw the snack cabinet and he's hungry. Then he asks his mom for cookies and his mom gives him some. So in the previous 2 examples, the behavior of interest was a behavior targeted for reduction. So like Sarah yelling or Johnny crying. In this example, he asked nicely, for cookies. And this behavior also serves the same function or purpose of getting access to something that he wanted. Okay. Now we'll do a little bit of practice. For the next few slides, I'll give you guys a chance to practice reviewing and analyzing some examples. After reading through the scenario, I'll give everyone a few minutes to type into the chat what they think the antecedent, behavior, and consequence is, and we can discuss it together. All right, so this example is about Annie. Annie and her mom are at the zoo. Annie sees a large snake in the reptile room. Then she runs over to her mother crying. Her mother picks her up and gives her a hug, saying, "It's okay, the snake can't touch you from in there." So I'll let you guys have a couple of minutes, type into the chat what you think the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence is. Okay, I'm liking all of these answers. I see people are saying antecedent, people are in agreement. She sees the snake, definitely. I'm noticing that some people are saying she's becoming scared. That could definitely be something that's happening. We tend to think in behavior analysis about like what the external situation is and not necessarily assume how somebody feels about it. So we would say like, yeah, she sees the snake, right? The behavior, everyone is in agreement. She's crying for mom, she runs over. Um, yeah, runs to mom crying. I forgot the word. And the consequence is mom hugging her and telling her she's safe. Yes, exactly. So I feel like mom comforting her, everyone's in agreement, that's the consequence. So let's see. Perfect. Yeah, so she sees a large snake, runs over to her mom crying. Mom picks up Annie and comforts her. One thing I'll tell people is like we don't typically look too closely at like how somebody is feeling in the moment. We try to look at those external consequences so that we can understand like what we can do in the future, right, to change or help behavior. Look at this next example. So Benjamin is playing cars with his brother Devin. They're taking turns putting it down the ramp. Then Devin pushes Benjamin out of the way and puts his car down the ramp. Benjamin cries and pushes Devin back. Their mother approaches and tells them to stop fighting. So the tricky part about this scenario is that we're looking at specifically Benjamin's behavior here, not Devin's. Devin is present, and I'm sure you guys have definitely seen kids interact with each other. But whenever we're analyzing a situation, we look at one individual's behavior at a time. Okay, perfect. People are already throwing answers in, so I'll give you guys a second to do it. All right, this looks great. Yeah, so let's see what the ABC says. So Devin pushes Benjamin out of the way, puts his car down the ramp. Benjamin cries and pushes Devin back, and then mom comes over and tells them to stop fighting. So Exactly. I liked how this time around I saw a lot of people giving just like exactly what happened, that like objective analysis. It can be a little tricky to think about. Definitely those feelings exist, right? Benjamin's probably mad or sad or something else is happening internally. But just by looking at this, we might not know how he's feeling. So looking at that like external consequence, that external situation. Perfect. I love it. Mom comes over and tells them to stop fighting. Let's look at the next section. Awesome. So now that we've had some practice looking at antecedents, behaviors, and consequences in a scenario, we can all talk about what it all means in terms of the function or the why behind the behavior. So calling back to those four functions: escape, attention, tangible, and automatic. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit more in depth about the function. So here's the first one. We'll talk about a tangible function. So this is like when a behavior occurs because the individual wants to gain access to something. They want access to a toy, an activity, a location, some food. We've already talked about the baby crying, but maybe that example with William, right? He asks his mom for food, and then mom gives him some cookies to eat, right? That would be an example of a behavior occurring for a tangible function. One thing to remember with the function, people aren't always aware that this is happening when they engage in a behavior. For example, like I might be thirsty and take a sip from my water bottle, but I might not be thinking like in my head, I'm sipping from my water bottle because I want water, right? You just engage in these behaviors because in the past, the consequence is what you have intended. So here's a little example of a tangible behavior. So Sally sees a toy on the shelf. She points to the toy, and then her mom gets the toy down for her. So the behavior of interest, pointing, achieves the result of getting a toy. So the behavior has a tangible function. She gains access to an item. Next. And so then in the future, that behavior is going to increase. So basically looking at the consequence actually changes the rate of behavior in the future. So it'll make this behavior happen again and more like more often probably, right? So now Sally is learning that pointing kind of gets me the things that I want. So she's more likely to point to the different things that she wants. Next one. Now we'll talk about an escape function. An escape function is when a behavior occurs because the individual wants to avoid, escape, or delay, an activity, a task, or an event. So like bedtime, getting ready for school, doing homework, etc. You can definitely mean delaying. So like arguing back and forth with mom can delay you actually starting your homework, or avoiding. So we talked about the highway example, slowing down when you see a police officer on the highway, you're avoiding getting your ticket, right? Or escaping entirely. So you might be telling your mom, I'm all done eating broccoli. And mom says, okay, and puts the broccoli away, right? So escape is kind of like anything that'll get you away from that thing you don't want to be dealing with right now. Definitely like waiting to answer that email that you don't want to answer. Not picking up the phone for someone you don't want to talk to right now. When a behavior is successful in avoiding or escaping or delaying an event, it's more likely to occur in the future. So again, I love to say this, you don't always know this is happening, that you're engaging in this behavior for this function. So here's an example. So mom tells Lily, it's time for a bath. Lily says, I don't want to take a bath right now. And mom says, all right, let's take one later. Here's an example of a delay. So now in the future, Lily might say, I don't want to take a bath right now when mom asks her to, because it's delayed it for her. And it has met that escape function that she had intended, right? Or this behavior had intended. Lily might not know that she's doing this, right? But her behavior would increase in the future regardless. Talking about an attention function next. So an attention function is when a behavior occurs because the individual wants someone to engage with them. So getting a hug, being told good job, etc. It can come in many forms. So talking to someone, telling them good job, people providing applause. You can also see that like it's good or bad or good or positive attention, or it could be bad or negative attention. So like some kids do like to hear, you know, a reprimand. So I always think of like a class clown, like the kid that's always kind of acting out in class so that the teacher has to tell him to sit in his seat or send him to the principal's office. It's not always going to be like the good job and things like that is the form of attention that people are looking for. It can even be like trying to just get closer to somebody, right? The individual might not be aware that this behavior is happening. So here's an example. So Kevin sees his mom sitting on the couch, then he climbs into his mom's lap, and his mom gives him a hug. And Kevin's behavior increases in the future. So basically the function of this behavior is attention. So when he engages in it, he gets attention from mom. He's more likely in the future to engage in this behavior to get that mom's attention. Automatic. So this one is probably the trickiest. It's also referred to as sensory. You guys might hear like, oh, this is a sensory behavior. The example some people put in of like humming or hand flapping. So when a behavior occurs because engaging in that behavior feels good, like scratching an itch, engaging in stereotypy, and things like that. These behaviors occur all the time without us realizing it's happening. It's not always obvious, like motor stereotypy or hand flapping. So I'll ask you guys to share a few examples. Anyone thinking of examples of like automatic behaviors that you might see your kids engage in? Teeth grinding, yeah. Bouncing, yes, I've seen that for sure. And these are not behaviors that are the other functions because they feel good to do on your own, right? Picking, like skin picking, I've seen that for sure. They might screaming, jumping, bolting, pulling hair of peers, scratching. Yeah, so I think some of these behaviors like pulling other kids' hair and things like that might have a different function than automatic. Automatic is specifically referring to those behaviors that occur that feel good to do on your own. Pulling somebody's hair might result in like getting attention from them, like that kid might turn around and yell or tell them not to pull their hair. Bolting might be an example of something that you might be bolting to get to something. See, turning and running in circles, laying down outside. You guys have a lot of examples of automatic behavior. I love it. Um, yeah, so it's spinning. I love it. He likes the way it feels. Oh, well, maybe he's telling us what the function is himself. Okay. Great. So again, these are things that you might not be aware is happening to you as you're engaging in it. See the next one. Oh, I gave this example, sorry. So Rachel's hair is down and keeps tickling the back of her neck. She puts her hair up in a bun, and her hair stops tickling the back of her neck. In the future, if this happens, she's more likely to put her hair up. Oh, I like this one. My son loves to count and counts all the time for no reason. Feels good to him to count. That's so sweet. Okay. Talk identifying function. So this one is going to be like practice for you guys. So I will let you answer in the chat what you think the function is after I go over it. So James is playing with his brother and his brother takes one of his toys. James begins crying. His brother says, "I'm sorry," and gives him the toy back. James stops crying. So the thing that happened, his brother takes his toy, he cries, and then his brother gives him the toy back. Which function do you guys think this is? Is it tangible, escape? Yeah, I was about to go through it. I can put it in the chat for you guys too. So Tangible, escape, attention, automatic. So yeah, give it a shot. Let me see. Yep, everyone is hitting the nail on the head. It is a tangible function, right? He engaged in the behavior and he got access to an item, an activity, something that he wanted. Great job, you guys. All right, the next one. Lawrence's brother or mother tells him it's time to brush his teeth. He has a tantrum and he won't stand up to go. His mother says, okay, let's do it later, and he stops having the tantrum. So his mother says it's time to brush teeth. You guys are already on this. He has a tantrum. And then she says he can brush his teeth later. Okay, let's see. Okay, awesome. I'm seeing people say that it's an escape function. I agree. Yeah. And he's escaping this by delaying it, right? It's not all done. She probably just took him later to brush his teeth. But because in that moment he had the tantrum and she said, all right, we can do it later, it's an escape function. Perfect. Great job, you guys. All right, let's talk about this one. After a day at the beach, George gets a sunburn. Sunburn's very uncomfortable and hot, and he applies some aloe to the burn and the discomfort decreases. So the things that happen is sunburn is uncomfortable, he applies aloe, and then the sunburn is soothed. Which function do you guys think this behavior has? List again, of course. All right, I'm seeing some answers. Automatic, tangible. Anyone else have thoughts on this? What do you think it is? Good question. I'll pop it in the chat again. Those are the 4 functions. Oh, am I not putting them in the chat? Sorry. Let me put them to everyone here. Are you guys able to see this? These are the 4 functions of behavior. All right, so I'm seeing a few different answers in the chat. And I'm gonna go over kind of each one. Let's see. Perfect. Thank you. I think I was sending them just to like the host, so you guys weren't seeing them. Great. So I saw automatic, escape, tangible. Here you go. This is the function that it is. So we'll talk a little bit about that, right? So tangible, I could totally see that because he's looking for that aloe gel that would make it feel better. But the actual consequence or the behavior was applying the gel, and then the consequence was that the sunburn he had felt better. So because the engaging in the behavior made him feel better, and just the engagement in that behavior was what kind of had the result of soothing the sunburn, we would say it's automatic. And I also kind of understand escape, like wanting to escape the discomfort of like a sunburn, right? But because the behavior is not like social in nature and it's like something that feels good to the individual by doing it to themselves, that's why it kind of leans automatic. Does that make sense to people? Does anyone have questions? Okay, great. So we'll move on to the next slide. This is another example. So Grace is sitting alone with her toys. She starts crying and throwing her toys. Her mother enters the room and picks her up to comfort her. So Grace is alone. She cries and throws toys, and then her mother comes in and picks her up. What is the function? Do you guys think? Yeah, you guys are getting this one. Attention, right? Mom came in and gave her attention. So perfect. Um, through these examples, we're just sort of trying to think about situations like from a behavior analytic perspective so that we can understand like the why kind of behind it for sure. So thank you guys for your participation. We'll move on to our next slide. So why does the behavior keep happening, right? That's like the big question of the day. Um, a specific consequence. So the reason behaviors continue to occur is because the consequence provided to them is providing the results that the behavior is looking for. This is why we might see some behaviors happen over and over again, even though like in the moment we're able to end them. So a specific consequence ending an occurrence of behavior does not mean that it won't occur again. When a consequence appears to work or end a behavioral episode, it'll likely cause the behavior to occur again in the future and possibly like more often. So some examples, like a child cries, the daycare instructor rushes over to pick them up. The child might cry more often to get picked up at daycare, right? We're not saying that children cannot be picked up when they cry, but we're here to like identify why they're crying, right? To give them alternative ways to communicate what they want. So for example, the daycare teacher here could be maybe teaching the kiddo like to say, can you pick me up? Or I want a hug. And that'll achieve that same result of getting someone's attention. Another example is like a child grabs a toy from their friend and their friend lets them have it. So they're more likely to grab the toy in the future. So just because like they stop the grabbing when the friend lets them have the toy doesn't mean that that's going to decrease the behavior, even though in that moment it made them stop grabbing toys. So that's why you might see a behavior continue to occur. So what's next, right? What do we do now that we've assessed the function? Responding to behaviors can be really tricky in the moment. So being patient and providing your child with some space to calm down can present opportunities to teach an alternative behavior. So once you've identified why a behavior occurs, you plan on responding how to help decrease it in the future. So here's like kind of a small list of potential alternatives that can be taught to help your child find ways to communicate what they need without having to engage in undesirable or behaviors targeted for a reduction. So functional communication, this is one we talk about all the time. Parents often know their kids so well that they can almost read their mind. You know exactly what your child is trying to communicate through their behaviors, or it might not be so, but it might not be so easy for teachers at their school or friends at the park or their classmates. So functional communication is a thing that you could teach your kiddo to help them decrease the occurrence of behaviors in the future. Being able to say things like, I'm all done, or I want that, right? Engaging in a safer behavior. So that's another thing we might teach as like an alternative. So an alternative to like running away might be holding hands with your mom while you're walking down the street. The next couple of slides will go more in depth. All right, functional communication. What does this mean? So you want to, since we've talked a little bit about how parents can often read your kids' minds, like every mom I've met can tell me exactly what each type of cry means, or just take one look at their face or the way that their kid is sitting and know exactly what they're trying to tell you. This is very helpful for you guys, of course, to make sure that they're getting what they need and feel safe. However, this can also mean that they don't always have to practice using their words. So in order to encourage your child to communicate, you could try, you want to like encourage them whenever possible to use their voice, their body, their pictures to communicate. So using their voice, like vocally telling you the things that they want and need. Some kids might point or use sign language. Definitely some kids use alternative communication methods, so like an AAC device or PECs, if you guys are familiar. The picture on the side is a kiddo with an AAC device, which stands for Alternative Augmentative Communication Device. And it's basically supposed to help kiddos that maybe don't vocally speak have a way to like tell you by touching different icons where it'll like speak out loud and say what they're touching to help them communicate. They might request things like your attention, to be all done for a toy or a snack, right? So in order to like encourage your child to communicate, you can often, oh, let me see. So your daughter's muscle tones make it difficult for her to sign. She doesn't sign much and her AAC device is too overwhelming. That can be a little bit of a challenge for sure. I feel like in these situations, we'll talk about it for sure, but like consulting with the BCBA can help individualize kind of like the ways that you're working on your daughter learning. It is difficult for a lot of our kids to pick up sign language, and it's not often commonly taught, but it's still like a really great way to like at least show your kiddo, right, what you want them to say. So sometimes we'll even just model communication and that can support them as well. So you know what she wants, but in that moment, you might just show her what she should say without the expectation of her saying it. Just like, oh, it seems like you want some more. She benefits and likes to use a few adaptive signs. I love that. Yeah, and you can modify the signs. I've definitely seen kids sign more like this or like this. And we want to encourage them to communicate. So you can try things like acting confused. This is literally my favorite one to like encourage communication. So, for example, you might see your kid standing near the fridge and you know that they want to get juice but can't open the fridge on their own. You might go over and say, like, what do you need? Can you show me or tell me? And allow your child to problem solve in that moment how they could tell you. And you know your child best, of course. So some children might communicate by pulling an adult over, some may use their voices, etc. Melissa shared a great example of her daughter using adaptive signs, but does anyone else want to share like ways that their kids communicate with them? Picture exchange, sign, and AAC. Yeah, definitely. Foster daughter pulls us wherever she wants us to go. That is such a strong form of communication. Brings me a cup when he wants more. I love that. I definitely teach that a lot. Asking her, do you want to eat or drink? She tries to show me the sign, even sometimes not the exact one, but I can help her sign the correct. Exactly. I love that. Do say very short sentences like want drink, want pizza. He doesn't always pizza. Okay. I love that. Um, she brings us things other than us when she can't open it. Love that she's trying. I love that. Yeah, so just sort of meeting your kiddo where she's at, right? Not everyone's going to be ready for that AAC right now, but the reason we try to like encourage these forms of communication is because it helps your kid tell you in a safe and appropriate way rather than engaging in those behaviors targeted for reduction, right? So the purpose of this webinar is like talking about strategies. So for my juice example, What I might do is just give your child some time to tell you what they want before giving it to them. So you're acting confused, like, I don't really know what you want right now, and give them a second to try. For the juice, you might wait until they say, open the fridge or juice, or pull your hand towards the fridge before giving them what they want. I love these examples. Yeah, they're so diverse. I definitely see all of this in my work, and we are working always as behavior analysts to like get them to that next level, right? The next one is talking about engaging in a safer behavior. So some undesirable behaviors or behaviors targeted for reduction can be unsafe. So like running away in the community, hitting others, etc. I know you guys had mentioned some. You want to work with your child in practicing safer behaviors, so holding hands or using their words when they're mad. Both of these strategies, like functional communication and engaging in a safer behavior, should be used before the behavior occurs. Can you guys think of some behaviors that they feel might be unsafe and what you think the function might be for your kiddo? And that we can talk a little bit about an alternative behavior that's safer. Picking, for sure. And do you kind of have an idea of what the function might be? Throwing things when he's mad. Mm-hmm. Stretches or pinches. Oh, he kicks when he doesn't want to leave someplace. Yeah. Things are really bothering, hard to tell us exactly. Guesswork makes chemistry. Kicking with heels on his sister or me. Yeah, so I'll go to this example, like to stop you from leaving a place. Um, Another behavior you might teach is like teaching him to ask for more time, or using his words and saying, I'm mad, instead of kicking or hitting you, right? And something's bothering her. It's hard for her to tell us exactly what we have to do. Yeah, that can be really tricky, right? So validating her feelings, saying like, I know you're not feeling well. You could tell me like, something's bothering me, something's hurting me. Once tends to charge, run impulsively when he was younger. Definitely seen that before. A safer behavior might be working on hand holding. I tell people to work on the strategy before the behavior occurs, and I guess what I mean by that is doing practice time. Like when you know that walking from the car to the entrance of the park is hard, like maybe you practice holding hands at home, like while you're in the backyard or something, so that they get practice for when they are in that situation. They mad and they keep doing that behavior? That's a really good question. I would say that's when you would consult with a BCBA who knows your kiddo and can actually help you individualize a treatment for them. Um, let's see. So I'll kind of go, we have like maybe a few more examples and then a couple more slides there. And in the interest of time, I just want to make sure that we get there. So I'll just do a couple of examples and then we'll talk about the final thoughts and wrap it up. So here's an example. So Lizzie will run away from mom while on walks in the neighborhood. And over time, she noted that she tends to run away when mom gets a phone call or has to answer a text. When Lizzie runs away, her mom chases her down and tells her she needs to stay with mommy. So looking at this, oh, I like that. Social stories can help teach your kids. Yes, attention. So that's the function. And what's a behavior you could teach her instead? So that she's not engaging in running away for attention. Hold your hand. Yeah, I love that. Any other thoughts? Tapping you on the shoulder. I like that. Yeah, definitely. Obviously in the moment, right? Her safety is top priority. So if you need to chase her down, go for it, right? But to treat this behavior before it happens, you might practice at home how to stay with mom when she gets a call. teaching Lizzie to hold mom's hand on walks, teaching her to tap her mom's shoulder for attention, things like that. When you're not in the situation of, oh, I'm getting a call and I know she's going to run away, right? I've definitely done practice scenarios where I tell the kid, like, I'm going to pretend I'm on my phone and you're going to tell me what you do when you want my attention. So you can definitely create those opportunities for your kids. I'll just jump ahead to this example. Nicole loves to jump on furniture. When her mom sees her doing this, she'll ask her to stop, but she keeps jumping anyway. Um, Nicole sees furniture, jumps on it. Okay, so what do you guys think the function is of this one? Well, Nicole kind of keeps jumping, right? So I feel like she's kind of enjoying jumping on the couch. It doesn't matter what mom says. Nothing's going to get her to stop here. So what might be the function? Sensory, yeah, automatic. Um, definitely. So what is something you could teach her to do instead? Furniture jumping is sensory seeking, definitely. Um, I wonder, yeah, so I feel like for teaching her like an appropriate behavior, you might choose to teach her something safer that she could do. I've definitely worked with kids who, if I'm seeing them jumping around, it's an indication that they need a little bit more sensory input. So I might say like, hey, it seems like, yeah, jumping on a small trampoline, or I might take them outside to play on the playground, getting that physical input, right? Engaging in a safer behavior than jumping off the furniture. Bouncy ball, love it. Yeah, I've definitely seen kids love that like yoga ball. So this is kind of like coming up to the end. Yeah, we're about to wrap it up on the last, this is the second last slide. I would say like all of the things that we talked about in this webinar was to give you guys kind of a deeper understanding of why behaviors might occur at home. The examples and suggestions in this webinar are obviously not individualized to your kiddos. So these are just sort of ideas, but of course you guys know your kids best and I've never met them. I'm just trying to give you guys sort of the framework of how we think about these things so that we can identify ways to teach our kids and support them. My best recommendation to you is to consult with the BCBA who can observe your child and work with you to provide care that more directly supports what your kiddo needs. I really loved how much everyone participated. Did you guys have any final questions of the last couple of minutes here? No. Scrolling through some of the chat. Yeah, definitely like any further questions you guys have, please reach out to your local BCBA. We love to help on these things. And thank you guys so much for coming today. I hope you have a great rest of your night.